A Place Called Perfect, Chapter 20, Wickham Terrace. Boy was still unconscious when Violet began to saw through the thick collar. Her progress was slow and he was gradually coming round as she cut. "Shh!" she whispered when he started to groan. "It's me, Violet. I'm going to free you, but you have to be quiet. There are watchers downstairs." Boy slowly opened his eyes and grimaced. "Shh, boy," she hushed again. "We need to get out of here fast." A chair scraped across the floor downstairs and Violet increased her speed until at last the lever snapped. Setting the knife down, she helped Boy up from the floor. He was a little groggy as he wobbled to his feet. They shuffled to the door and peered round, checking the landing. All was clear. "Thank you," Violet whispered as she passed the room across the landing. "What for?" Boy mumbled, confused. "I wasn't talking to you," she replied as they slipped quietly along the dark landing to the window ledge. The plastic sheeting billowed in the wind, muffling the rattle of the ladder as they climbed back down. Boy was still a little wobbly and Violet crossed her hands that he wouldn't fall. When they reached solid ground, she led him round the side of the house and they rested against the wall, catching their breath. "What happened?" Boy slurred, his eyes still sleepy. "George Archer caught you. I saw him spray something into your face, but there was nothing I could do." "Oh, I think I remember I met a woman," Violet interrupted urgently. "She said she knows which house Dad is in." "He's here," Boy said, sitting upright. Violet nodded and filled him in on all that had happened while he'd been unconscious. Once Boy was up to speed and steadier on his feet, they decided to sneak back across the estate to the house the woman had pointed at. Taking care to stay low, they ran round the tarmac road, past the pillared entrance until they reached the house. Then they crawled up the garden and crouched underneath the windowsill. "You have a look," Violet said, her voice shaking. "I'll keep an eye out for the watchers." "He's your dad. Don't you want to—" No, just in case he's not there." "But I thought you said the woman saw him." "She didn't see him exactly. She just said there was a lot of stuff happening in there." Violet snapped, glaring at Boy. "Please, just do it." Boy looked at his friend, his face a little red. Then he shrugged and peered up over the rim of the concrete sill. "I'm not sure I can remember what your dad looks like," he said, bobbing back down to Violet's side. "There's a man in there, and he kind of looks like him, but he's a bit thinner than I remember. It could be him." "What do you mean, it could be him?" Violet said quickly, peering up over the ledge. This room was different from any she'd seen on the estate so far. The floor was filled with shiny wheeled steel tables, like the ones used in hospitals. Glass boxes sat on top of the tables. In each box a small red light shone down on a solitary eyeball plant. Another larger table dominated the centre of the room. It looked like an office desk and overflowed with papers that streamed onto the floor. A whiteboard crowded with calculations and red arrows filled the back wall. A man in a white coat was standing by the board, looking a little perplexed. "Dad!" Violet gasped. He'd lost weight. His eyes, underlined by half-moon shadows, bulged from slightly sunken cheeks. He looked worn and sad. What had the Archers done to him? She was about to knock on the window when someone entered from the far corner of the room. It was Edward Archer. She ducked back down quickly. "Edward is in there with my dad. We have to do something," she hissed. "I don't know, Violet," Boy said. "I can't think straight. It must be the stuff George used to knock me out. My head's all cloudy." "But we have to get him out now," she pleaded. "Can't we go somewhere, just for a bit? If I get some rest, it'll be easier to think straight and come up with a plan. If we rush in now, we'll get caught." There's a room full of watchers asleep just a few doors down, Violet. We can't be stupid about this." "I'm not being stupid," she snapped a little too loudly. "Just listen to me," Boy whispered through gritted teeth. "Right now, it's too dangerous." "No," Violet insisted. "We have to do something now. Who knows what's going on in there? What they're doing to him?" "Violet, please be quiet. Edward's in there, remember?" "You don't want me to get my dad just 'cause you have no parents. You want me to be an orphan and live in no man's land just like you." "What did you say?" Boy stared at her in disbelief. Everything stopped, including Violet's beating heart. She was too angry to speak. Boy stayed under the sill for a minute or two longer. Then, silently, he crept across the garden, onto the tarmac road and out the estate entrance. Violet didn't look round. She didn't need Boy. Saving him had given her confidence. She was fine on her own. Her eyes watered, but she wouldn't cry. Shakily, she crawled away from the window, round the side of the house, and rested her back against the wall. Her dad needed her now. How was she going to break him out? She got onto her feet and snuck past the back garden. Unlike the other houses she'd seen on the estate, this one was almost finished. It had all its windows and doors, and the only means of getting in that Violet could see was through a frosted glass window upstairs that was partially open. She needed a ladder, and she knew exactly where to get one. She snuck back to the house where Boy had been captive and slipped round to the back garden. The ladder still rested against the wall. Dawn was creeping into the sky, and she hoped the watchers inside were asleep and wouldn't hear her skulking about in the half-light. She was just moving the ladder when someone cleared their throat. She froze. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. Then the foul smell of morning breath infected her nose. "Well, well, look what we've got here," Fists whispered into her ear. Violet turned quickly, her muscles tensed. Her back was pressed against the rungs of the ladder, and Fist's tree-trunk arms rested either side of the rusting metal, blocking her escape. His fiery red beard dangled in front of her, and she pulled it hard. He winced and grabbed his face as she dashed under his arm. She raced down the side of the house and was about to break out onto the tarmac road when he grabbed her top, yanking her back. She squirmed, but she couldn't loosen his grip. "Well now, won't I be Mr. Edward's favourite?" he laughed, shining a torch directly into her eyes. Blindly she kicked and wriggled, but couldn't get free. "Duck!" somebody suddenly yelled. Violet did as she was told, and a large rock whizzed over her head, landed smack on the bridge of the watcher's nose. Fists fell to the ground, roaring in pain. Violet looked round. Boy stood silhouetted on the road. She was about to say something when he raced forward, grabbed her hand and took off. As they reached the green, sleepy watchers were emerging from the house across the way to give chase. Boy and Violet sprinted through the rows of plants, heading for the billboarded exit out of the estate. Suddenly Violet tumbled. One of the plants had wrapped itself around her leg. She tried to kick it off when she caught sight of an eyeball glaring out at her from beneath its translucent petals. These plants were eyes too, just like the ones in the houses, except bigger. Her stomach churned. Boy tried to pull her free, but the plant wouldn't let go. It clung on like a crazed animal. The watchers were almost upon them when he grabbed the pulsing stem and ripped it as hard as he could. Blood gushed in all directions from the severed vein, and Boy sprayed it at the watchers, slowing their advance. Then he shoved the plant in his pocket. Suddenly a terrifying shriek cut through the night like a sound of 1,000 wailing cats. The once sleeping plants pulled back their petals to reveal masses of bloodshot eyeballs and screamed. The plants flung themselves at Boy and Violet in a frenzy as they hurtled past. Barely escaping the green intact, the pair dashed by the faded billboard of the Happy Family. They were out of the estate and on a potholed road, barren fields stretching either side of them. "Hurry!" Boy said, sprinting ahead. "No Man's Land is just across the river." A footbridge appeared in the early morning light. It was elaborate and looked like it might have been there for centuries. Two tall, thin metal spires stood on either side of the river. They were connected by thick wire ropes that stretched across the water, dipping low in the middle. Thousands of thinner wire threads, which must have once supported a wooden plank floor, were broken now and dangled in the water. Hardly any of the planks were left. The bridge was just wide enough for one person. "We can't cross that! That's hardly a floor!" Violet exclaimed, watching the river rushing past below. "We have no choice. Come on, we don't weigh much," Boy said, clocking the advancing watchers. Quickly, Boy jumped onto the first plank. It wobbled, but he held tight to the wire ropes and managed to balance himself. "Come on, hurry!" Violet looked at the waters speeding below. "I can't," she said. The words were out before she meant them. "You have to," Boy replied urgently. She checked back. The watchers weren't far behind. She looked at the plank ahead and tried to blot out the image of the water. She bent her legs to jump, but nothing happened. Her muscles were frozen. She tried again, but still she couldn't move. An image of her parents flashed across her mind. She had to do this for them. She had to save them, and that was impossible to do if she was captured too. She jumped. Time slowed. It seemed like an eternity until her feet hit something solid. Time resumed. She wobbled and grabbed the wire rope to steady herself. Boy had already moved on. She followed him across the broken footbridge, her legs on fire. Suddenly the bridge started to shake as the watchers began to haul themselves across. A loud crack and a roar broke the morning stillness, and she looked around. A watcher dangled from one of the thick wires as his friends tried to pull him back up. Boy was already on the other side, shouting at her to hurry. She jumped from the last plank and rolled onto the grass bank, finally landing in No Man's Land. He pulled her from the ground and raced ahead. Boy ducked down a lane to their left. It was signed Wickham Terrace and flanked either side by rows of dilapidated houses. She recognised the name of the street, but she couldn't remember why. "Check the doors," her friend gasped. "There has to be one open." Violet tried a few handles, but they were all locked. She could hear the watchers grunting as they began to catch up. An old shop sign hung out on the street. "Prescription Optical Makers." She pressed on the door handle and it opened easily. "In here," Violet said. The pair hurried inside and gently closed the door behind them. With their backs to the worn wood, they rested for a moment as outside the watchers darted past. "Who goes there?" a man suddenly shouted from the shadows. We don't mean any harm," Violet insisted, looking at Boy. "We were being chased and—" "Where did you get those?" the man croaked. His voice was dusty, as if it hadn't been used in a while. Violet looked at Boy, who shrugged. "Answer me!" the man snapped. "Where did I get what?" Violet replied shakily. "Your glasses. Where did you get them?" I found them," she said. "Don't lie to me, girl. Where did you get them?" "I found them, I promise. They were under my mattress," she insisted. "Give them here," the man ordered, stretching out his hand. Violet looked at Boy again and he nodded. She took the frame slowly from her face and held out her shaking hand. The man grabbed the glasses from her grasp. "How did they get under your mattress?" he growled, stepping out from the shadows. "I think you're telling me fibs, little girl. The last time I saw these, they were in the hands of my brothers. You're working for the twins, aren't you? Trying to set me up again, are they?" The man walked to the window and pulled back the dirty lace curtain, checking the street. The early morning light fell across his face. Violet recognized something in his features, and his suspicions suddenly made sense. She looked at Boy, her eyes wide, then addressed the man. I think I know who you are," she stammered. You're William Archer." And that's the end of chapter 20.